spending a moment of your day with us.
Sure thing. Happy to.
um, Welcome, Joel Oliver. Thank you for tuning in with us from Calgary, Canada. I tell you, you Canadians, you just keep coming into my life. I'm losing track of how many people from Canada I've had the honor of interviewing. So thank you for coming on. And Joel, you are such a breath of fresh air for we heart patients. Your story is easy peasy. And you know, all of us heart patients, we all have our own stories. And I think it's important when we listen to each other's stories that it's so easy to compare and to maybe even have a little envy that someone has it easier. But we're all on our own journeys, and the power of story has we can't even begin to understand the power of sharing our stories. And so um, I am so glad that you reached out, and I'm honored. And I know we're all going to be better for hearing your story today.
Thank you, Boots. Well, just the few minutes that I've gotten to speak to you already, I love what you're doing, and you're a shining light here. You're a very bright personality, so I appreciate already that you've made me feel like very good since we started chatting here. So, thanks for what you're doing and the opportunity to be on here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're like Mr. Mitral Valve, and I was, you're the only person I've had the opportunity of meeting who's had like a simple valve repair and then went about your day. And so, I mean, yes, you had a bit of a rough road right afterwards, but let's dive in. Your mitral valve repair was in 2018. But walk us back to like what led up to that.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess it matters in this context. It was actually a replacement. So I have a completely not
Yeah.
natural titanium mechanical mitral valve inside. So, yeah, that's an interesting fact to share with new friends when you meet
Yes.
people. Um, so, yeah, I mean, these days and leading up to now, like since the surgery, things have been pretty good. I have a business, I work remotely. So, I was quite nervous at when the whole surgery thing was coming about that would impact my life and I wouldn't be able to travel anymore. There's with this mechanical valve blood test required, so a lot of that was running through my head. What's going to happen once the surgery takes place? But I am happy to say that since that happened in 2018, aside from the bit of recovery time, I've lived quite a not only a normal life but a great life, and I'm quite fortunate for it. So leading up to things in 2018, I would say probably 7 to 10 years before that, they had just been watching me. There was a couple of instances over that time where I ended up in hospital with some atrial fibrillation. So pretty scary. Heart rhythm is out of whack, feels very different. It feels scary and you don't really know what's going on initially. So there's a couple of times that happened. And that's what led them to discover that I had a leaky mitral valve, essentially. It just wasn't working efficiently. So your heart is pumping to try to move the blood around, and it's not working efficiently. It's getting tired, essentially, like your heart is wearing out. So they were keeping an eye on it to see if we would have any further developments that would necessitate surgery. And it did end up that I guess it was somewhere around 2017, they tested me and said, yeah, you've got to get this surgery. And obviously I felt a lot of dread come over me at that point because I wasn't actually expecting it. Of course, I knew they were monitoring me, but at that point in my life, I felt pretty good. It was summertime. I was hiking. I was going to the gym. Didn't really have any noticeable issues. Like, your story was quite different than mine because you were having some very obvious problems and you were unsure what was going on. I felt pretty good. I would get some irregular heartbeats sometimes, but I didn't feel that my energy was super low. Although I guess when you're living in that situation, you don't necessarily have a reference point, like how good I'm supposed to feel. But at that time, I didn't think that surgery was coming. Now, an interesting side note here is my mom, this is a genetic thing that I have. She actually had the same issue and the same surgery, but she had it much later in life than me. So I was 28. She was in her early 50s, meaning that she had the same surgery about a year before I did, roughly. So I actually got to watch her go through it all. and I kind of knew a little what to expect, how it was going to go, about the medication I had to be on. So I saw that coming. I kind of knew what I was in for, although you can't really be fully prepared. But yeah, I got the news, and then about a year later, I went in for the surgery, and a few months of recovery, a little bit of rehab, and I was feeling pretty good. I think 28-year-olds are not sure it happens, but that's not who they are expecting typically to see walk in with that issue. So I was fortunate. I bounced back pretty quick, and things have been pretty good since then.
Just like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can make it sound relatively simple by telling the story, and looking back, you know, when you're in that situation, it's difficult. But now that it's in the past, it's just, yeah, it was tough. But when it's when you're actually living through it, which is the worst of it all, I suppose.
Yeah, the
It sounds not so.
time seems to crawl. Like, if you wanna know how to slow time down, because like, you hear that, right? People say, "How do we slow time down?" And "Time moves so fast." I'm like, "Wait for heart surgery. That will slow time down."
Exactly. Yeah, when you're in it, you're pretty miserable. You're not feeling great. But once it's in your past, it's hard to really associate with that again. Like, I know it happened, but I feel pretty good now. So it's hard to say how bad I did feel. But yeah, you know, some tough times for sure. Anyone that goes through that.
Yeah. So, were your surgery was open heart.
Hmm.
Yep. And do you remember how many days you were in the hospital? Because if you were 28, you were probably out in a blip.
Yeah, it was no more than a week I was out.
Okay.
They let me
Because
go.
there, at least in the United States, and I would think it'd be the same in Canada, there's a rule of thumb for every decade you're alive equals 1 day in the hospital after heart surgery.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard about that rule, but it wasn't far off there. It was probably 4 to 5 days when I finally got to go home. It
Mhm.
certainly was no more than a week.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, with a spring chicken like you, like, how quickly they let you out. Because I was like, at the time I was 42, and I was in the hospital for 4 days after surgery. So
Hmm.
it was like on the dot. And I was doing so well, I could have gotten out in 3, but they said they were sticking to that rule of thumb on purpose because it really does matter how, like, it really is a proven formula
Hmm.
for what that's
Yeah.
worth.
The hospital was, I was quite agitated, or I guess, or irritated. My family told me that. I didn't really realize when I'm in it that I was not being the most friendly. I mean, I wasn't yelling or swearing at anyone, but my family came to visit, and you, as you probably know, you're just not in a normal headspace. You're drugged up. Everything hurts. So
Mhm.
that was one of the pieces of feedback I got, was that I wasn't very polite
Oh,
during that time.
no.
But yeah, that was an interesting thing to go through as well. Like, one memory I have was when they first got me up to walk around, which, as you know, they want to do pretty quickly after your surgery, get you moving. And yeah, again, it's tough to think back to, like, that I was actually in this situation, but I could barely make a few steps down the hallway. And it's like, yeah, that actually happened. It almost seems like a dream sometimes, but I could barely walk, in a lot of pain. But yeah, it was good enough to be sent home after that short period of time, and spent a lot of time on the couch after that.
Yes, so I have several questions. First of all, do you know the name of the genetic condition that caused both your mom and you to need a mitral replacement?
Mm. It would be mitral valve prolapse, from my understanding.
Yep. Okay. Okay. And what medications are you on now?
I'm on warfarin, which is a blood thinner, and also a baby aspirin every day. Now, I think the aspirin part is not necessarily for everyone. It's at the doctor's discretion. My mom doesn't take it, but she is also on warfarin. So for now, hopefully the foreseeable future, that's it. Or maybe even less if we get a technological advancement someday where we don't need the warfarin, or at least a
Mhm.
better version of that. Because if you know about warfarin, it messes with your diet and what you can eat. But yeah, that's all for medication.
Okay. And I mean, from all the heart patients I've had the honor of talking with over the past couple of years, if that's all you're on, good for you. Yeah.
I think so too. I know when I first came out of surgery, there was a couple others that I was on. One of them is quite serious in terms of side effects and people not wanting to be on it. So I was happy to get those ones out of my life, and
Yeah.
yeah, hoping that it can remain this way.
So, one of the many reasons why I started this podcast was so folks could hear from the patient's perspective, which you've done for us. Thank you. And I I would love to have a conversation about the mental, emotional, spiritual parts of your journey because I have found that our medical industry, and I do feel like it's more of an industry at times, at least it can feel that way. They're really, the medical professionals are really great at saving our life and keeping us alive. And then that's about it. And then we're kind of left to figure out how to bring the rest of our soul along. And how have you experienced life, engaged with life since heart surgery? Like, do you feel like things have shifted within you? Do you feel like you're a different person? Like, how have you shifted mentally, emotionally, spiritually?
hmm That's a great question and something that I really admired about your journey because if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were so grateful that you ended up going through it because of the changes that it imparted on your life, which is really admirable. You were really positive and optimistic about the whole thing. So yeah, that definitely crossed my mind before I was going in there, and I thought, this could, and the odds weren't showing this, but this could be my last day alive. Could be my last day seeing my family. I don't know. Like, will I be a changed person when I come out of this and be so grateful for every day? I don't think I don't think I was grateful enough. So I wasn't really on the path and the mindset that you had, although I've liked to been. But I know in the years following the surgery, just went through a lot of transformation and self improvement as it was. And I am pretty mindful and grateful of everything that I have, the fact that the surgery went so well, the life that I've built. So it's hard for me to attribute a huge shift in my thinking to that. Although, like I said, I would have loved to really feel that way, like you did. And I think it's important to be mindful of that and have that mindset because it is easy to just slip back into just the day to day and not really being grateful for the life that you've been given, whether it's because of a heart surgery that allowed you to live a healthy life past when maybe perhaps you would have, or if you don't have any health issues at all. There's nothing wrong with being grateful. I think it's very important to do so. In terms of a big shift, I didn't really get what I expected. I thought I would be a little more, I thought it would be a bigger shift, or I'd just wake up every day, looking at the sky, but it didn't really happen that way. But I still am so grateful for everything that I have in life and the fact that I'm here and every day that I am able to live healthily. So perhaps that did play a role. It just didn't really, maybe I wasn't in tune enough with myself to really pick up on where that came from, if that makes sense.
That could be it. And, I'm not to play the age card, but it kind of does, like I am. Like I was in my 40s by the time my heart surgery came around. So I'd already been around the block a few times with other challenges.
hmm
And I'd already spent quite a bit of time in therapy for other reasons. And so and also I had been really growing my awareness muscle. And you're in your 20s. And I mean, I think back into my 20s, I probably would have had the exact same answer you just gave. So every decade has its own level of self-reflection and awareness. But yeah, as you age, things do hit differently. Not
Well,
that
that's
I'm a
I
whole lot older than you, but
well, I appreciate hearing that because it helps me feel better about it, perhaps because I thought maybe I'm not grateful enough, or why didn't I have that big shift? So that makes it make a lot of sense.
I'm not here grading you. I'm not going to give you like a letter grade
Hmm.
on your experience. I mean, everyone's experience is so personal, and I just can't emphasize that enough, actually, because I you're not the first person who has reflected back to me like, oh, am I doing, I'm not saying you just said, am I doing it wrong, but like, people are worried, am I not this, am I not enough of this, or am I too much of that? And we're all having the experience we need to have in any given day with any challenge we're given. Like it's just so unique. And I love that you are just like, well, this is just how it was. Like that is fine. It's more than fine. It's your real lived experience.
That is a great reminder, yes, because everything is uniquely yours. And now that I'm saying it out loud and you're talking to me about it, I'm thinking, why would you even think like it has to be a certain way? But I have
Yeah,
always
please
thought
don't put
about
that
that.
pressure on yourself.
Right. Yeah. And I've thought about that. Like, again, you just look back and I know that I went through it, but it was just like, and people, it was a big deal. But people can look in, you can share the story with them, and they would think, wow, that's scary. I would never want to have to go through that. What was it like? That's insane. They cut you open. Wow. But when you're going through it, you're just going through it. Like, I don't know. I didn't have a choice. It just happened. And you go through the recovery, and here we are.
Yep.
So, yeah,
Yep.
it's, a different perspective having actually gone through it, I think, versus what the general public would think who wouldn't have to go through. Just like I would think about anyone with any other medical condition. Wow, I'm glad I don't have to go through that. But as heart surgery patients, we had to go through that one and we know all about it.
It's a moment. It is a hard moment, but it is a moment. And I was just trying to remember the other day my journey because it's, been a few years now. I cannot remember getting ready to go to the hospital. I don't remember packing for it. I barely remember the drive. It's like a 5-hour drive from here. There's just parts that I just don't remember anymore. Um, and that's great. There's other parts that are just like it happened. But yeah, the brain has an amazing way of organizing our memory and tucking things away until either we're ready to deal with it, or if we're done dealing with it and we just
Hmm.
file that away as like a done file, put that in the done pile, right? Like we're all done with that. We don't need to revisit that memory. Oh no, we need to revisit this. So we're going to put this in the still to process pile. So yeah,
I'm surprised. Yeah, that's quite interesting. I would have thought perhaps there's some trauma, and maybe there is, but traumatic reason that it would stand out, or perhaps it wouldn't stand out and you would forget it for that same reason. I don't know a
yeah,
whole lot about the brain, but I know for me, there were several key moments that I do remember, some poorly and some like for in a positive manner. So yeah, I definitely have a bit of a different experience there than you when it comes to that anyway.
yeah. Well, before we go, I want to hear what is some advice you would like to give to heart patients listening that really served you well, and what do you wish you had known going into your surgery?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I guess I just assumed and hoped that it was gonna be fine. I guess there's no way to actually know it was gonna be fine, but yeah, I mean, my best advice, and I don't know, this feels kind of generic or like it's not that useful, but it's the best thing that I could say is just that, yeah, accept that it is gonna be fine. That's all I could do is know that it is gonna be okay and just handle it one day at a time. So it seems daunting, it seems scary, you don't feel very good for weeks and weeks after the fact, but just have that hope and that reassurance that it's going to be okay. Like, yes, I went through that. As I said, it's hard for me to kind of reflect and remember that I was that guy who could barely walk a few steps down the hallway, or I had to have my family help with my dog because I couldn't move. I was just lying on the couch, letting my scar heal, and I'm fine. That was just a moment in time. It took whatever 3 6 months, and it was rough, But after that, I was up, I was okay, and I've been living a very, very great life ever since. You know, I don't really notice that there's anything ever was done with my heart. I'm aside from the medication, there's a few minor things, but I'm just glad to be here. And that was just a moment in my life. And for anyone else that's facing something like that, I certainly hope and think it will be the same. You'll be fine. You'll get through it, and life goes on.
I could not agree more. I endorse your message.
I appreciate your approval. It means a lot.
Well, Joel, thank you so much for your time today. And how can listeners find you if they need to reach out for more inspiration?
Sure. Yeah. Publicly, contact me through my business. That's the great. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn. However you want to communicate is fine. But the easiest thing for me to say is the website eastcoaststudio.com. All the social media there. That's all me on there. So you're not going to get my assistant or anything like that. You can communicate right with me, and we can chat further about whatever I can help with in terms of the heart surgery life.
Perfect. Well, thanks for your time today, Joel. And I'll have everything in the show notes as well. So we wish you well in Calgary and keep kicking ass.
Thank you, Boots. I appreciate you as well and everything you're doing.
Thanks. Um,